For 40 years, the official record said the NBA integrated in 1950 and never looked back. That's the story they tell. It isn't what happened. Executives inside the league made sure you'd never learn that for decades after black players took the court. Front offices enforced an unwritten limit on how many of them could play at once. Someone made sure you'd never hear this. Here's what the records were rewritten to hide. 1950. Chuck Cooper, Earl Lloyd, Sweetwater, Clifton break the color line. The league calls it a new era. Newspapers call it progress. Fans are told the game is now open to anyone good enough to play it. That's the headline. It's clean, it's simple. And for a long time, almost nobody outside the locker room said otherwise. Behind closed doors, something different was happening. Coaches and general managers were making roster decisions based on a number nobody wrote down. Players noticed. Front offices denied it. The gap between what was said publicly and what was practiced privately would stay buried for a generation. Wayne Embry, one of the first black general managers in NBA history, said it plainly years later. Coaches told him there was a ceiling, 2 starters, maybe 3 on the floor at the same time, never more. Al Littles, who coached the Warriors, described the same unspoken math. It wasn't a memo. It wasn't a rule in any handbook. It was a number every front office seemed to know without anyone saying it out loud. Teams called it balance. They called it chemistry. They called it whatever word kept it out of print. And because it was never written down, it left almost no paper trail. That's the first crack in the official story. Integration wasn't a door that opened in 1950. It was a door that opened partway and stayed there on purpose for decades. Here's where it gets complicated. If this was real, why didn't it show up in box scores? Why didn't reporters catch it? The obvious explanation that this was just coincidence, just how rosters shook out, doesn't hold. Teams had more talented black players available than they were playing. Scouts flagged it. Players talked about it in interviews decades later, almost always after their careers were over, almost always in the past tense, like it was safe to say once nobody could fire them for it. The timing of when these stories surfaced isn't random. It's the timing of men who waited until they had nothing left to lose. Now here's what they actually buried. It wasn't a league policy. The NBA office never issued it, never enforced it, could always say honestly that no such rule existed on paper. That's exactly why it worked. Individual front offices, general managers, head coaches, a handful of owners, each independently applied the same ceiling, using the same coded language across different franchises for years that stretched well into the 1970s. No memo connected them. No commissioner signed off. That's what made it deniable. That's what let it survive so long after the public believed it was over. Scouting reports used words like intangibles and leadership qualities and clubhouse fit to explain why a player who outperformed his competition on every measurable stat still didn't make the roster. Nobody had to write down the real reason. The language did the work for them. It let executives sit in front of reporters and say with a straight face that race had nothing to do with it, because on paper it didn't. The quota lived in conversations that were never recorded, decisions that were never explained, and rosters that quietly, consistently, matched a number nobody would admit existed. That's the 43 years. Not just the fact of the quota, the decades it took for the men who enforced it to say so out loud, long after it could cost them anything. What did it cost? Careers that ended in Europe or the minor leagues instead of the NBA. Players who never got the shot their stat lines earned. A version of basketball history that looks on paper like a straight line of progress, when the real story is a door held stubbornly, quietly, half shut by men whose names mostly aren't in the history books. You never heard this because it was built to leave no trace, no policy to leak, no memo to subpoena. Just habit repeated by enough people in enough rooms to shape a sport without ever being written down. So the next time a front office passes on a player and calls it fit, or intangibles, or what the locker room needs, ask yourself whose vocabulary you're actually hearing. The men who built that language are gone or retired. The language isn't.